Hey party people, this is Jeremy for MVM, and today I'm here with another Kickstarter preview of Ruins of Mars, which is published by Atheris Games. It's a 2 to 4 player game, plays in about 60 to 90 minutes, and in this game, our players have discovered the ruins of Mars, and you're competing scientists, and what you're trying to do is decipher the languages that are there, so you can also gather and discover resources, and you're going to use those resources to build cool techs. And as you get better and better at deciphering these languages, you will be able to make better tech as you go along. What really this boils down to is that you're trying to race up these tech charts to score the most points and also be able to hit certain thresholds to unlock tech cards. The tech cards that you acquire also will score you bonus points depending on how you set those up. And then on the main board, it's actually like a worker placement where you just take the actions that are there, but there's action tiles. And when you get done activating them, they separate, they move along in a mancala like movement, and that kind of sets up actions for other people's turns. And we'll explore all that today. Hopefully I help you make an informed decision, but I'm not going to keep you here too long. Let's go ahead and get to the boards. For the player setup, players are going to receive a board, and the board is really nice because it's a nice little player aid. It talks you through the turns and all the symbology of the game, but you're also going to keep track of resources there. You're going to have your fuel, parts, plans, and oxygen, and also a space for radiation. Now, radiation is not good. It's going to be negative victory points at the end of the game, and we'll talk about how that works. You just want to watch out for it. And then you also have your tech board, and that's where your level 1, 2s, and 3s techs are going to go. Speaking of which, you're also going to receive tech cards from level 1, 2, and 3 to start the game. You'll receive one from each deck. You'll also receive these hourglass tokens. These hourglass tokens are used to trigger things, trigger abilities, and also move action tiles, which we'll talk about a little bit later. You'll also randomly receive a character, and these characters can be used once per turn, and they have additional actions to help you gather another resource, activate a tech card, heal radiation, things like that. So there's a lot of little cool things going on there, but that does add a little bit of, little bit of diversity to how the game is played. Moving on to the actual game setup, you're going to have a language track. Now players, the last part of the player setup would be putting on your action tokens at the bottom of each one of these tracks. As you look at the track, you're going to be moving up there and scoring what's called prestige points. There are A points, B points, and then there's at the top, which is like the canopy of the whole thing. As you move up, you're going to score more points, but actually some of those points along the way will help you unlock things on your tech board, which we'll touch on later. The main board has 5 locations, and each one of the locations has different actions, and we'll talk about those, but you specifically want to look at the action tiles. Each location has 2 of them, and then finally the one on the farthest left, the wasteland, will have 3. The last part of the setup is to create a little tech area here. You're going to have 3 levels of tech cards. You're going to shuffle each deck, deal out 4 going down, creating a column going down for each one, and then you're going to put this oxygen kind of track on there as well. It's going to be numbers 0 through 4. You make sure it lines up with 4 at the bottom of the text, and then at the top where 4 is going to be where the decks are. And we'll talk about how you pay the cost for those as we explain the rest of the preview. All right, so you're ready to start the game. You're going to go ahead and give the rover, and that's not a rover in the prototype that you're seeing in the pictures. That's actually just from another game. Remember, this is prototype form. And then you're going to begin your turn. All right, we're ready to take a turn. Player's going to take the rover and place it at one of the 5 locations. Now you can refresh your cards, you can refresh your text, you can refresh your player card, player ability, because you may have used your last turn. But you're going to go ahead and activate that actual location you've placed it at, starting with the radiation token. So there are 3 out of the 5 locations that have radiations on them, and the workshop has 3 of them, and the laboratory has 2, and the workshop has 1. Now that's going to be added to your player board depending on which one you landed at, and then you move forward to pulling an action tile. So you have the option of taking these action tiles, and I should probably explain that. Each action tile has 2 icons on them, and they represent some of the things you've seen. The wrench is going to be for bonus actions, which we'll talk about in a second, but the rest are going to look similar to the resource markers on your player board, and that's where you're going to track those and add them to your board depending on the actions that are there. They also match the icons on the language track as well. So now that you know that, you want to decide whether you want to bring an action tile over from an adjacent spot. You spend the resources, you move one over there, and you can't grab one from a place that only has one of these tiles left because you can't leave a location with 0. So you'll do that. Then you'll take a look at the wrench action, and these wrench actions are bonuses. They have to have a wrench on an action tile under it, and you can have multiple ones depending on how many tiles you have there with the action icon. They do things like give you the Decipher action, which helps you move up the language track. They give you additional resources. They can also remove a radiation, or they can give you an oxygen token, and that's all contingent upon what location you have chosen for that round, for your turn. Then we move on to actually taking the site actions. The site actions are specific to the location there are. You're going to have you're going to have 3 things you can choose from on your turn. The first one being with this black and white icon here. This is called Decipher. It's going to allow you to move up the language track according to how many of each of those color icons you have on each action tile. So let's say I have 3 total red on all of my action tiles combined. I will move up 3 slots on the language track. If I have a combination of red, green, and yellow, I will move up red, green, and yellow according to how many of those icons I see on the action tiles. Pretty simple. The same goes for the Discover action, but the Discover action is actually gathering resources, and those would be, you will take the number of icons you see for each color and then move that same amount on your player board, as in taking in resources. Now there is also a brown icon that has a track on the language track, but for resource gathering, for Discover, it's actually going to be any resource. So you can choose what those are. There's only one of those tiles, so if you happen to pull one of those, you can kind of control your destiny, which is kind of cool. Then you have a final action, it's called Research, and what you're doing there is you're counting the amount of action tiles you have at a location, and then you will turn those into hourglass tokens. Now these hourglass tokens are so important because they're going to give you the ability to use your tech cards. They're going to help you move action tiles possibly, and then they'll also unlock your abilities for your characters because you want to use those to your advantage, and sometimes you can get a good engine going by using these things, so you definitely want to have a lot of those. Don't overlook them. Next, you can buy tech cards. Okay, and this is totally optional. You don't have to do it, but if you have the resources and you got the right timing, definitely want to start paying attention to this. When you want to buy a tech card, you want to start by looking at the row that it's in. You have this oxygen column right there that's going to tell you how much it costs to buy something in that row. You're also going to have to pay the cost of the tech that is in that row as well. So of course, the higher the number of tech or the level of tech, the more resources it's going to cost. But if you're at the bottom, it's going to cost you 0. You just pay the cost of the actual card, and then you're good to go. Now, as you buy cards, they're going to give you different abilities. Some will give you prestige points at the end of the game. Some will give you a one-time bonus. Some will give you resources at the beginning of your turn, and other ones will give you actions that you can use by paying your hourglass markers to activate them. Now, if you really are looking for something specific, you can go all the way to the top and pay 4 oxygen and go to one of those decks, look for a specific card in that deck, and then shuffle those cards and then put them back. Okay, so there's actually a pretty cool little way here to find the complete set you want. Now, what do I mean by sets? These cards all have A, B, C, or D on them, and you're going to use those for scoring at the end of the game. So you really want to pay attention to how you fill rows, but I'll talk about that at the end game. There's one really important rule to note, and that's how the language track and and the tech board work together. In order to buy level 2, now level 1s are easy. You put them on the leftmost column of your tech board, and you're fine. Now, when you want to buy a level 2, this is how it works with the language track. You must reach at least the A point, or the first scoring point, on 2 different tracks in order to buy a level 2 tech card and place it on your board. You can place it wherever you want to on that board, on the level 2 column, which is the middle column. In order to make a level 3 card, or to buy a level 3 tech card, you must reach the A point on 2 different tracks, and also the level B, which is even further up. It's going to score you more points, but also further up on one of these tracks. And when you do that, you can buy level 3 cards. Now, how does that work on the language track? In order to master a language, which means basically getting all the way to the top, you have to have at least a level 3 card. Now, only one player can master this each language, But in order to do that, they must have level 3 tech cards. So there's going to be a little bit of a back and forth of how that works, and you're going to have to pay attention to what's most important to you. You may not necessarily want to get a whole bunch of level 3 tech cards. You may just want to get to the very last spot on the language track to score points, and that may be the way to do it. Or you may just come in second place a lot, like I do. All right. The next thing we're going to do is reallocate tiles. What you're going to do is take those action tiles from that location. You're going to put them in your hand, shake them up. You're going to take one of those random tiles out, put it at the location that you just took the actions at, and then you're going to take the other tiles and place them one by one in the locations to the right at the bottom. So you're just going to be placing them in kind of a Mancala type style. And if you get to the end of the board and you have to go from the infirmary to the right, you just wrap it around back to the wasteland. And that's pretty much how that works. And as you can see, when you do that, you're going to be setting up other people's turns. They're going to be paying attention to where those wrench actions are, where everything's landing, and you may have a huge stack of tiles at one location. That's important to know. Once a player has allocated all the action tiles, they will pass it over to the player to the left, and they will continue to take turns. Now, turns will continue until 2 of the in-game conditions happen. One player fills up all 9 slots on their tech board, or players combined will complete 4 of the 5 tracks, 4 of the 5 language tracks, and that would be at the top. One player can only complete 3, so you would have to have someone else at least complete another one. Once that's happened, one of those things happen, all other players except for the active player will get one more turn, and then we start tallying up points. Now, going immediately to the language track, you're going to look at where each player is on the track and total those points for each track on the language chart. Some people will be in between, but whatever point you are between, you're going to score those points. So if you're between the level 1 or A and the B, you're going to score the points for A, okay, that kind of thing. You'll tally those points. Then you'll go over to your tech board, and this is where all the little combo stuff comes in. First thing you want to look at is your rows. You will only score for completed rows here. If you have a completed row with all the same letter card, so remember I said before that these tech cards may have A, B, C, or D on them. If they all have the same letter, let's say for instance A's, then you will score 9 points for that row. If you have a complete row with all different letters, let's say A, C, B, then you will score 6 points for that row. And if you have a complete row and it follows none of those rules, like let's say A, C, C, then you will score 3 points for just having a completed row. You also want to pay attention to the tech cards that have in-game prestige points as well. And then you want to get to the bad stuff, and that would be the radiation. Now, whoever has the most radiation will receive a -2 points per token, but the rest of the players will receive -1. And then your final score, whoever has the most points, prestige points, wins the game. I always say points, I'm sorry about that. But if there's ever a tie, it's the player with the least radiation, and then if that's a tie as well, then you're going to be looking at the most points on the language track. And that's the game of Ruins of Mars. Let's go ahead and get to my final thoughts. All right, party people, final thoughts here on Ruins of Mars. Now, I'm going to say it right out the gate, this is a really slick implementation of the Mancala system. I love Mancala, but I like that this is a really good gamer's version of Mancala because you're going to have these action tiles. Some of them may fall into your lap at the location you want them to. Maybe you don't take any radiation this turn or a really small amount. You go to the workshop and then you get all these tiles, and maybe you want to move over one more tile. And maybe you have a tech card that helps you move a second tile, or a player ability that helps you move a second tile. So you have all these ways of stacking up these big turns possibly, or setting people up for a real juicy turn, but it's going to allow them, they're going to also have to take on a lot of radiation. So those are things that are at play there and the choices that can happen, and I like that. I also like that these tech cards are kind of like your little engine board. You're going to be paying attention to the in-game scoring possibilities, the one-time abilities, and also sometimes the round abilities, because you may have an engine where you get rid of radiation and you get a Decipher action every turn. So you have those abilities that you can trigger. You also have the kind of play between that and the language chart, because you got to hit the certain thresholds to get to those tech cards and unlock them. But I also like that you can just race up the charts and score points, and that's going to put pressure on people who invest in a lot of tech. It may be a way to come back. In fact, I did that, and I only lost because I had a lot of radiation. So you just got to play that right, and I didn't have the engine to get rid of it, nor did I have the character that gets rid of radiation. So I didn't build my engine right, but I felt like it was really, really close, and if I didn't have to pay 2 negative points per token, I would have been okay. So that lets me know that there is some strategy at play there, and you can't be completely reckless. So I think I'm going to leave it there. I hope that I helped you kind of give you an idea how this game works. Hopefully I helped you make an informed backing decision, because I can never tell anybody what to do with their money. If you have any questions about Ruins of Mars, you can ask them in the comments below. If I made any mistakes or anything you need clarity on, I'll try to make sure I answer them as soon as possible. I want to thank you for your time. Please feel free to like and subscribe. And you guys have a wonderful day. The Kickstarter link should be below. Take care, party people. You guys have a good one.